Hello, and welcome to Community Voices, where we talk to Humboldt County's movers and shakers. Today's guest, Carly Robbins, Executive Director, Food for People. And now here's your host, Paul Bressoud.
Hello and welcome to Access Humboldt's Community Voices. I'm your host, Paul Bressoud, and today we're speaking with Carly Robbins, the Executive Director of Food for People. So I always start out, what does the Executive Director of Food for People do?
Well, I've just recently stepped into the role after being with the organization for 8 years as the development director. So I'm still getting my feet under me as the executive director, but it's, being the leader of Food for People, which is working with our amazing team to make all of our programs run. We are the food bank for Humboldt County, so we actually have programs that go all the way up north to Oric, out east to Orleans, Wichipec, Bridgeville, Dinsmore, down to Garberville, Redway, and many places in between. So it's making sure that the food bank can keep all of our distribution programs running, making sure we're getting the food in necessary, and all the logistics that go into getting it back out.
So even a farther step back, what did the development director do?
Development director, so I was focused on the funding side for the last 8 years. So doing fundraising, grant writing, that kind of stuff. We recently finished the capital campaign to rebuild our main facility. So that was a major focus of mine for the last few years. But yeah, just everything it takes to make sure we can keep the food bank running on the financial side.
Well, is that a natural progression, you think, to go from the development director to the executive director?
Well, I would say I definitely come in with a little bit of a leg up just knowing more about food banking. It's a very particular world, and there aren't a lot of other jobs that really set you up to know exactly what you're walking into. But because I've been there long enough, I know how the programs run, where most of our sourcing comes from. So I have a leg up on knowing what I'm walking into.
I cannot let you say a term like particular world without having you explain the particular world.
Well, food banking is a lot of different focuses. So, a good quarter of what we do is all warehousing. It's making sure, and warehousing and food safety, making sure you can get truckloads, pallets in, making sure you're following FIFO, first in, first out, food safety regulations, doing transportation and trucking, making sure you have all the forklifts, box trucks, everything you need on that end to keep logistics running. It's working with partners to source, to make sure we have all the distribution sites in the county necessary to get food out. And we also do a lot of direct services. So that is having staff who are talking to people one-on-one, providing food, sitting down, listening to their stories, what brought them to the food bank. We have people who do nutrition education work. We have people who help sign people up for CalFresh and other assistance programs. So it's a varied organization and world. You got to be able to keep the logistics in mind while also making sure you're trying to lead an organization into providing human services with dignity and respect, and everything that kind of goes along with that.
Now, and you're in an amazing spot, a spot I was once in with the Eureka Teachers Association, where you're taking over for a long-time leader. Does that make the transition smoother? Does that make the transition easier? I know there was a lot of fear when I transitioned. I mean, is that all part of it?
Definitely, I would say so. Ann Holcomb, who was our executive director for 22 years, built this organization into an amazing food response source for the community and county. She has built all this out. She keeps a lot of the info in her head. She just knows all this naturally. So there's a little bit of the fear of not having all of it directly in my head yet. And I think there was a lot of, kind of anxiety and concern, what's going to happen if Ann's not in charge anymore, because that's all we've known for a really long time. So
Right.
It's trying to step into those shoes and fill them.
And you have a new location.
We do, yes. As I mentioned, we were rebuilding our main facility, which is not only where we do our Eureka-based food distribution, but it also has all of our storage, warehousing, big refrigeration freezers for all of what we do throughout the county. It's kind of what we call our mothership. And in February of 2020, we had a major sewer inundation, which is not what anyone wants for a food bank. And at the time, we decided to do a full rebuild. So we took that building down, and we were focused on new construction for the last 3 years, and we just moved in June.
So that you were the development director then. I mean, that must have been
big job.
Funding city.
Yeah, I think COVID was not our friend, or supply chain issues. Yeah, we had an original budget of $4.5 million. That was our goal, to be able to make it happen. And just the way the world and prices went, we ended up having to raise 6.2, which we did. We're now
Congratulations.
Going in debt free, which is a very big win for us.
Outstanding. Now you talk about sources. I was fascinated when looking at your website. I asked you about a few programs. I was fascinated at looking at the connection that you have to local producers. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, supporting the local food system has been a big part of Food for People's mission for a long time. We have a couple of different ways we get at that. One is a coordinator who helps with our gleaning program. So that's taking herself or volunteers out to harvest at local farms, backyard gardens, or orchards to access foods that would otherwise not be used. Maybe the farmer's not going to get them to that row in time to take it to market, or it's the food that's bolted a little, still totally usable, but might not be fit for distribution or sales. So we can access all that food, make sure it's not going to waste and is going into the hands of people who can use it. We also do local purchasing with agricultural producers, be it farmers. We just made an order for quinoa with the amazing local farm that does quinoa. And that's a couple of different funds. The first one that kicked it off was Locally Delicious, which was started by a group of women that called themselves the Heirloom Tomatoes. They're focused on the local food system and equity. And so that fund allows us to contract with local farmers early in the season. So they are guaranteed the funds up front when they're starting off the season. They have all the high costs. And then we're guaranteed food for our programs throughout the rest of that growing season. And that's been an amazing, partnership working with our amazing local farmers. We have a lot of local farming for our, little rural graphic area. And it works out really well.
Let me ask a couple questions about both of those parts of the program. With the Locally Delicious program, do you contract with farmers for certain crops at the start of the year?
Yeah, so that's the general idea. We work with these farmers and, say we want to purchase X amount of whatever, how many pounds that is. And then hopefully they fulfill it throughout the season. But if for some reason they can't fulfill that, we try and work with them to access something else they might have. Sometimes, local farms, especially with the strange year we've had, too much rain can actually mean a bad thing early in the growing season for farmers, or blight, anything else. So we'll try and work with them to execute their contract, even if it's not for the exact thing.
Do you have farmers that you've had long-term working relationships with, so you go back and you know that you can ask for this crop? And
yeah, we have lots of farmers we work with year to year. We're always looking for kind of the newer up-and-coming farmers as well, because getting started as a farmer can take a lot of finances and resources, so we try and help out as best we can there. And then we have plenty of farmers we work with regularly who might also be a gleaning farmer, but we do purchasing through as well.
I want to go back to the gleaning. I want to go back to the backyard.
Yeah.
When I read about this, it was my favorite part of reading. I had a dear friend, and we used to walk around his neighborhood, and he knew every fruit tree that hung over a fence, and we would go check the fruit and get the fruit. And I always thought to myself, wow, I wonder how much backyard fruit there really is. How much backyard fruit is there out there?
A lot. And apples around here, huge crop. We're going into what we anticipate to be a banner year for apples.
Yes.
Just thousands of pounds of apples that either we harvest or people harvest themselves and donate. One thing we actually did a few years ago, we might bring back depending on how the season goes, was the apples we weren't able to give out. Sometimes they're bruised or otherwise they're just not fit for. We actually partnered with Humboldt cider. So anything we could not give out, they took and pressed into a cider that they then sold, and proceeds went to help support the cleaning program.
You know, I have good cider apples, and too many, I should just take it straight to them so I could go to the cleaning program, which is another part of the cleaning program that I thought was interesting, and something that citizens can do to help Food for People is the plant a row for the hungry.
Yeah.
I thought that was that needs to get out there. That's almost kind of like the citizens' victory garden in a sense to help out. So explain that and how people can help with that.
Yeah, so the idea with Plant a Row is just encouraging the backyard gardeners. We have lots of amazing backyard gardeners around here.
I'm not amazing, but I'm a backyard gardener.
You can be prolific around here. And you know, when they're starting off their growing season, what they're planning for, to just plant an extra row for Food for People. They can either harvest it themselves and drop it off, work with our gleaning program to come out and access it, but it's a great way to give back from what you have in your own garden you might not be using, and make sure it's going to people who can really benefit from it.
So in my backyard, green beans, cabbage, onions do really well. So if I planted this, I could just come in with a box of that and say, here I planted an extra row.
Exactly.
That's fantastic. I think that's so cool. And I'm going to plant an extra row. I think that's great. CalFresh. That's another thing that interested me when I was reading your website. Talk about the way that CalFresh can match purchases at our farmers market to support our local farmers.
Yeah, so CalFresh, for anyone who's not familiar, is California's version of SNAP or food stamps. And there's lots of ways you can use your CalFresh benefits to help augment your food spending. One of those ways is Market Match. If you go out to our local farmers markets, NCGA, or the North Coast Growers Association that runs that, they have a booth you can go to. CalFresh benefits, they'll give you tokens that you can spend, and they will match, I think it's $10 per. So double your spending at the local farmers market. You can get really high quality produce right there using CalFresh benefits, which is amazing. Another thing people might not know is you can use your CalFresh benefits to buy things like seed starts for a garden. So you can, there's a couple places you can do that locally. I think McKinleyville Ace, I was recently talking to them, and they're on top of it. But so you can use your CalFresh benefits to hopefully grow your own food to support your food supply.
That's fantastic. You said that you recently gone back to the choice model. What is the choice model?
The choice model. So in that, I was referencing our brand new Eureka Pantry at our new site. And it's been called the Choice Pantry for almost a decade now. And what that is when people come in, they go through a quick intake process. They sit down with one of our volunteers to just find out family size, if we can connect them to other food assistants, maybe CalFresh, or refer them to any other program. And then based on their family size, they get a card that tells them how much they are able to access in the nutritional groups we have set up in the pantry. So they take that card, they get a little cart, and they can shop through, the freezer section, refrigerated, all of these things, just based on family size, and pick out what works for them. It's a wonderful model because people can pick what works for their diet needs, cultural significance. We have some foods we can access if, say, you have specific dietary restrictions. We have lots of people who come in who are diabetic and have very specific diets they need to shop for. But it gives people that dignity of choosing their own food. It cuts down on food waste because it's not handing people a packaged box with stuff that they might turn around and donate back or toss. And it gives people coming to the food bank the respect that they're able to choose what they want for them and their family.
You talked earlier about being the director and all of the different aspects of Food for People you have to watch over. I would imagine warehousing and, I worked in a grocery store for getting things out, they've got dates, there's expiration, there's perishables. How difficult a task and how amazing are the warehouse folks turning food over?
That warehousing is actually a very large part of what we do as a food bank. So that's accessing food, all the logistics that go into that, from transportation, which is not an easy thing up here on the North Coast, storage, first in, first out.
Well, I'm going to ask a question about transportation. Is that going to get the food, or is that also taking the food to other locations, or both?
Both, really. We do a lot of local food access, as we've been talking about, but we also get foods trucked in from other sources, usually in the central California area. Getting food trucked up here is really tough. Trucking in general is hard on the North Coast. We contract with a local company to do backhauls, so they're taking a full semi down to drop off pallets of whatever it is that they're carrying, and then we pay them to bring, drop off, stop off, fill the truck back up, and bring pallets back to us. But we pay a pretty penny for that. I think we're hovering around $100 per pallet of food we've already paid for, but just to get it trucked up here. So that's difficult. And then what happens back at the warehouse is we break all those pallets down, repalletize, food to go out to distribution to one of our mini pantries or mobile distributions. So that then means our crew loading all that up into a truck and driving it to the far reaches of our county. And when we make our trip out to Orleans, that's a couple hour drive on some windy roads, which depending on the time of year can be a little concerning.
So that's that pantry is that outreach. It's just not the Eureka location that's distributing food. Mm-hmm. It's all about the county. You've had to have, obviously, with all of this, and now you've had somebody in your job that's trying to do the financing. So you've got two brand new people in crucial spots. So an exciting time, I bet. Tell me about events and drives and whatnot that you do to, get the word out, get the name out, go ahead and benefit from the generosity of the community.
Yeah. So Food for People, we do food drives throughout the year. If people always ask what's the best way to help support the food bank, I will say usually giving finances is a little bit more effective because we can do the bulk purchasing. We can take $1, make it stretch a little further. But we also do lots of food drives for any food people might be looking to move out of their own pantry. So I know it's only, I think we're in August now, but we're already gearing up for the holidays. That's a big food drive time for us. We're very lucky that Senator McGuire is a big supporter, and for the last several years, he's coordinated a food drive amongst a lot of the local high schools to get the kids involved, thinking about food insecurity and helping support their community. So that's a really big one we have coming. And then what we've been working off of for the last several months has been the letter carriers food drive, and that is done by the Letter Carrier Union. It's actually nationwide, but all of the local letter carriers, I don't know if you've seen, you'll get a blue bag delivered to your post office box or mailbox, and then you're encouraged to fill it up. Our local letter carriers pick that up and deliver it to the food bank or pantry in their area.
So it's interesting what you just said about national. So is our local food bank part of any national organization?
We are our own nonprofit. We are a member of the Feeding America network of food pantries. We're what they call a partner designate organization. So mostly what that means is we're able to take advantage of a lot of their corporate relationships. So I had kind of mentioned some local food sourcing we do. Another whole portion of that is we have a driver who goes to all the local stores and picks up foods that are close to date or the store is looking to move out for one reason or another. And our affiliation with Feeding America allows us to pick up at the corporate stores like the Safeway and the Costco and all of those. And that makes up a large portion of the food we source locally.
And once again, if it's got a little bit of a short date, that's the key, is to have a warehousing group that's able to get it in and get it out while it's still good.
And a lot of that is done by volunteers too.
Oh,
that's
really?
A big
Fantastic.
portion, yeah.
Do you yourself, I'm always interested in groups in Humboldt County, have you left the county and gone and observed other programs such as yours?
Yeah. We actually have a really good network called the California Association of Food Banks, which connects food banks throughout California. We are definitely considered rural, and one of the working groups we've been a part of is the rural and remote. So we connect with other food banks in kind of similarly sized communities and able to share resources, ideas. Oddly enough, one of the food banks that kind of has a similar size and issues to us is in Imperial Valley. So all the other side of California, or the entirely at the south. So we actually have a plan right now. They just implemented a new inventory system. So we're going to try and get a couple of our staff down to go observe, see what they have, and see if we can bring it back to our own food bank. But we do visits to Redwood Empire Food Bank down in Santa Rosa. That's kind of our mother in the spoke and wheel model that the food banks have. And just a few weeks ago, we had folks from Shasta come over to tour our new facility because they're working on what it looks like to open up a bigger facility over there. So they wanted to see what we just did.
Are our areas, the challenges unique to the rest of California, or would you say that they're right in line with a lot of the challenges at the other food banks?
I would say we share a lot of the same issues with a lot of other food banks, but we also have some of our very own. Humboldt County, I'll just touch on emergency food response. Because of the nature of Humboldt County, where we're located, how far we are from other main hubs, means we're cut off really easily. That's not necessarily something a lot of other food banks deal with. They have lots of other roads in. So that's definitely a concern of ours. We experience, winter storms, wildfire season, earthquakes. So just because of our geographic nature, we've had to really plan ahead for what emergency food distribution looks like.
Let me ask if this is a concrete example. We had an earthquake last December. We had one community, Rio Del, that was impacted more than any other in the county. Was there a response from the food bank in a situation like that?
Immediately, yeah. Actually, we were out the next day. We have a food pantry in Rio Del with the Family Resource Center out there. So we were able to call Sarah over there, who coordinates it, and by the next day we were out with water, MREs, ready-to-eat meals, and food boxes for community members who needed the extra help. And then we had ongoing services we were providing to that area.
And I guess the same could be asked about the fires up near Hoopa and Orleans and whatnot. I mean, you're prepared to do the same kind of intervention? Not interventions. What would they be called?
Oh, I call it response. The same kind of response.
That's a better word. Maybe you should do my job.
Oh, I think about the food all the time. Wildfire is a little different than the kind of what you do during an earthquake. As we found, a lot of what we're doing right now is making sure we can keep programs going. We're also working with our local COAD, which is Community Organizations Active in Disasters. So that's getting groups together who respond to these kinds of things. So we are providing food out there right now, and then making sure we can continue services. We had one of our mobile pop-up pantries just last Wednesday, so we had staff out there making sure people were still able to access the food they need.
And the goal is, of course, not to have any interrupted service.
Ideally, yes.
And then, as the director now, is this time that you take to sit down and think, okay, this could happen here, this could, I mean, is that, there's a readiness plan, so to speak, for all of these things?
Kind of, yeah, and not just me. We have a wonderful staff who've been working to put these kinds of things together, but wildfire is now a season for Humboldt County. We can almost...
And that's...
I know that's
heavy.
It is a heavy thing. So we've taken a lot of the lessons we've learned in the last few years and kind of built out a program. We have a wildfire response team, so staff who are going out in these conditions have been fit for respirator, gone through medical evaluation. We're implementing all sorts of things if they get out to an area and have concerns about what we do then, how we respond. Yeah.
Did you ever think when you took a director's job you would have there's the job that's immense in itself, and it would just expand out and have all this the variety of issues and challenges.
Well, having worked at the organization the last 8 years, I had a pretty good idea of what I was stepping into.
Oh,
but
that's good.
if you'd asked me before I came to work at Food for People if that was going to be
What
a
it
part
all
of the
entails.
job, I would not have known.
We're running out of time. You need to give us your contact information and also where volunteers can go ahead and get a hold of you too.
Yeah, so anyone who's looking, maybe you're looking to access food yourself or connect someone, or you just want to know how to get involved, I encourage you to go to foodforpeople.org. We have all of it spelled out there. As I said, we've moved back into our new pantry and new warehouse with a pantry, and we have a big need for volunteers. We have about 250 volunteers every month who help make our programs possible. And we are setting up, getting back to the choice model, which takes more volunteers to do intake, stock the pantry. So we are definitely in need of people who want to give a little extra time. And we have a volunteer form right there. You can let us know how you're interested in getting involved at foodforpeople.org.
There you go. Well, that's about all the time we have for today. I want to thank my guest, Carly Robbins, for being here and joining us and explaining so much. I'm going to plan an extra row next year. And we'll see. I'm Paul Bressoud saying we're going to see you next time on Community Voices. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's great.
Thanks for joining us on Community Voices. If you represent a nonprofit that is interested in being a guest on Community Voices, email info@accesshumboldt.net. Access Humboldt, local voices through community media.